Usually presidents lose, and there was expected to be a red tsunami. What actually happened was more like a raspberry trickle. My name's Scott McLean. I'm a professor of political science at Quinnipiac University. I'm also co-director of the Quinnipiac University Honors Program. I'm here with a mighty, mighty Quinnipiac group of 15 students. Welcome, everybody. It's my distinct honor to sort of lay out some answers to the question of today, which is, how did we get here? How do we unpack this crazy, crazy election season and the kinds of things that were happening on Capitol Hill yesterday and will continue today, I'm sure. Kevin McCarthy, in his bid to be Speaker of the House of Representatives, first order of business at every Congress is to elect a speaker. Now, the Constitution does not say that the Speaker of the House has to be a member of the House. Literally, the House of Representatives can elect me or you to be Speaker of the House. But the Republican Party, which holds the majority of seats, decided by majority vote before Congress that they would be nominating Kevin McCarthy of California as their nominee for Speaker of the House of Representatives. There's a little problem with that, though. Speaker McCarthy has one of the smallest majority margins of any speaker in history, and he does not currently have a majority of the votes in order to become speaker. It went for 3 ballots yesterday and then adjourned. They're going to start again today with new ballots, and they'll be voting and voting and voting until a speaker is decided, or when Kevin McCarthy decides he's not going to be speaker and someone else can become speaker. And the other problem for McCarthy is that with every ballot, he's losing votes of his own party. So he started with more votes on the first ballot. Now he's on the third ballot, he got 202 votes. So 202 votes, when he needs 218, he's a very long way from getting that 218 vote majority to become Speaker of the House. Why is he not getting the support of his party? Other speakers have had just as small of working margin of majority. Nancy Pelosi was elected Speaker when the Democrats had a very small majority like this. What's going on with Kevin McCarthy? Why can't he put the ball over the goal line, if you'll excuse the sports metaphor? Part of it is the Freedom Caucus. These are a group of very conservative members of the House of Representatives, many of them aligned with Donald Trump. Several of them challenged the legitimacy of the 2020 election, and they want concessions from Kevin McCarthy. A very small group, but if you're a small group and you hold the key to power for someone else, you become a very important group. So things that they want, they've already gotten lots of investigations. We're going to hear a lot about Hunter Biden's laptop in the next 6 months. We're going to hear hearings about the FBI and investigating the FBI, in looking into the IRS and its enforcement practices. The Democrats increased the spending on IRS enforcement, and there is a common link in all of those things that the Freedom Caucus wants. It's because the FBI, the Justice Department, and the IRS are all looking at Donald Trump right now. So that's got to be a part of it. Trump is someone in the background, and who yesterday, when he had the opportunity to support his Kevin, as he calls him, my Kevin, he balked. So this is really up in the air, and it's not clear that McCarthy will have the votes after any number of ballots, but we'll see. What else do they want from Kevin McCarthy? What else are they asking for? And does that jeopardize McCarthy's hold on the other Republicans who are not in the Freedom Caucus, who were always behind McCarthy? Will they back away if McCarthy goes too far towards the Freedom Caucus. They want more power for the rank and file. They want it to make it easier for the Republican majority caucus, whoever the majority is, to unseat a speaker they don't like. They opposed all kinds of any large spending bill. They want Kevin McCarthy to not allow that to come to the floor. So there's a lot of things they demand, and we haven't seen more than one ballot for speaker since 1923. So it's been 100 years since something like this has happened. So McCarthy has some problems. He has that tiny majority, and we haven't had a speaker come in for the first time as a new speaker with this small of a majority since 1931 with John Nance Garner. And this is the first multiple process. But McCarthy was dealt a bad hand. Partly of his own making, but partly not. One of the things that's remarkable about McCarthy is that he's extremely mad during the riots on January 6, 2021, that President Trump wasn't doing more to stop the rioting. And McCarthy went to the floor of the House as the day went on and basically blamed Trump for what was happening. But a few weeks later, Kevin McCarthy had gone to Mar-a-Lago and posed and shook hands with Donald Trump and became Donald Trump's candidate for Speaker of the House. But this has not added to McCarthy's popularity, and it hasn't helped his popularity, not with the Freedom Caucus or with the other Republicans either. There are 20 Republicans who are still on the fence about Kevin McCarthy, and this is a historical problem, maybe unprecedented. No first-time speaker has ever had such a small group, as I said. But McCarthy has been here before. So in 2015, McCarthy was in line to be the next speaker after John Boehner resigned. He'd had enough of this job. He said no more. And McCarthy was next in line. McCarthy had even more votes to work with in 2015. He had 260, I believe it was 254 seats, much bigger majority, and he still couldn't get more than 202 votes. So if he couldn't do it then, couldn't do it in 2015, it looks very difficult to see how he could do it in 2023. So this is a challenge for McCarthy. And I think McCarthy's dilemma helps us get to the idea of how did we get to this? And so if you'll excuse me a little summary of very recent history, and my time is very limited, I'll just try to hurry through it, but we know most of the story already. So January 6, 2021, the Capitol is stormed by angry protesters. And even though Biden was elected fairly comfortably, but very close in several states, his election was challenged, and it was challenged violently. The other part of this is Biden's job approval never really recovered after the initial presidential honeymoon period. So Biden had reached sub 50% job approval rating by the time the 2022 election comes around. We had very high inflation. Congress did not seem to be getting it in gear until very late into the first session at the last Congress. But a lot of remarkable bills were passed, and a lot of our speakers will talk about this. But Biden was below 50%, and this is really usually a formula for the president's party to lose a lot of seats. And so the historical precedent is that there would be a Republican red tsunami, huge margins of victory for Republican House members, that the Senate would shift over to the Republican Party. But it didn't happen that way. And I think partly because of the Roe v. Wade being overturned. Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court late spring. And polling did not show a lot of excitement or anger about this. Small groups, and a lot of people were concerned about it, but there were signs that this would lead to something of a surge for the Democrats, and it did. Most polls all the way into September showed actually a slight Democratic advantage when people were asked if they would vote for a Democrat or a Republican in the House election. Slightly more were planning to vote for Democrat, but that evaporated by October. And so it looked like there would be this red tsunami. Add to that problem of Biden being an unpopular president in his first term, and appearing to be at a disadvantage on the generic House ballot to see who would win House control. 19 states, Republican-led states, placed greater restrictions on voting rights and ballot access, restricting college students, restricting people who are recent move-ins, making it harder to register to vote. In some cases, setting up an opportunity for legislatures to simply overturn outcomes of elections and weakening secretaries of state who were previously much more independent, which, as it turned out, was very important in the 2020 election when we had a state like Arizona, and also in Arizona, Georgia, places like this where secretaries of state stood up to pressure from their own party to try to extend the vote count, maybe reverse voting, listen to claims of voter fraud and the like. Same thing with the independence of the judiciary. Court cases were brought about voter fraud. Not a single one of those cases and allegations of voter fraud were deemed to be of sufficient weight to merit reversing or recounting or rerunning the 2020 election. And so Biden was elected president. And that was a difficult situation for Republicans, and surprisingly, it led to a Republican non-revolution in 2022. Usually presidents lose, and there was expected to be a red tsunami. What actually happened was more like a raspberry trickle. Republicans won, they took control of the House, but they lost a seat in the Senate, and now the Democrats have a pure majority in the Senate. And that raspberry trickle turned out to be, though, a loss for the Democrats, but because the expectation was that they would lose, Democrats were celebrating. And Democrats are celebrating on Capitol Hill. You'll see photos of House members walking into the House floor of the House with bags of popcorn to just watch the show that's going to unfold today. So it will be a sort of buckle up, get ready for a really good example of political theater today. It is historic in one respect. Joe Biden is the first modern president in his first term to be under 50% job approval, to have lost so little in his own party's quest for the Congress. So only 11 seats were lost. That's really only 4% of the number that were up for grabs in the 2022 election. That is absolutely the lowest. No other president has been, to put it oddly, has failed so little as Joe Biden, right? There are no modern presidents who have failed so beautifully as Joe Biden did in 2022. So just to put it in perspective, Obama lost 24.5% of the seats that were up for grabs in his first term House election. Clinton lost 20%. Why? And I'll just be really short about this because I'm running out of time, but also our speakers are really going to get into this. So there's really two factors. The first one is that Roe v. Wade decision. Polls said that this was not the most important issue on voters' minds. But I think those polls missed the impact of Roe v. Wade on key groups. Number one, young women and college-educated people who are under 30. Those particular groups turned out in high numbers in key states, especially in states where there was a Donald Trump nominated, Donald Trump sponsored candidate running, that there was a backlash among those groups. And we had really the second highest voter turnout in 30 years. And it wasn't just nationally, it was in states that really, really mattered. So when we look at a state, for example, like Arizona, 18 to 29-year-olds are only 12% of the electorate in Arizona. But over 70% of 18 to 29-year-olds voted for the Republican candidates for governor and senator in Arizona. That truly made the difference in those two elections. If there is a group that can claim to have decided the 22 election and led to this magnificent failure by Joe Biden and the Democrats, it's you. You are the people that make that difference in this election, and you made the difference in 2020 as well. So we could look back that in those key swing states that determined the 2020 election and handed the victory to Joe Biden in those very narrowly decided swing states, I think people between 18 and 29 who are new voters really made the difference. And your activism continuing on during that time period was key. And so just to wrap up, here's some data about how the youth vote for the Democrat mattered in this election. So you can see that in almost every case, youth turnout not only increased, but also the support for the Democratic candidate in those state races. Part of this story, I think, has to do with the extraordinary pain, trauma, anguish, anger that was felt by young Americans during the pandemic and its culmination on January 6th. We saw higher than usual incidents of drug abuse, depression, anxiety, sleeplessness among your age group during the pandemic. At our own Quinnipiac University poll, we found that although most age groups were shocked by the January 6th riots, it was the 18 to 29-year-old group, you, that really sustained the sense that American democracy was under attack, that it didn't just end at the end of the day on January 6th, that it was continuing. And that sense of intensity, of urgency, of the need to step up and at least cast a vote, but also become more active, has really transformed your generation. So we're going to hear a lot today about why that is and hear more of that story. But we're also trying here at Inside Washington to give you ways to channel that sense of urgency or that anger into civic engagement. So I talked a little bit yesterday about how to speak to one another in terms of civic dialogue, to really probe one another, to respect, but also highlight one another's differences. Later, you're going to hear during the week how you can get more involved on your own campus, and I hope that each and every one of you will commit to take this opportunity and learn something here about not just the issues, but about each other and how that you can be a leader in the future. And with that, my time is out, so thank you very much for listening to my opening words.